Donald Trump is absolutely losing it right now as his attempt to cover up the cold-blooded murder of Alex Jeffrey Peretti has utterly failed. Donald Trump is stunned as his own MAGA base is turning against him based on this despicable cover-up. Donald Trump is seeing groups like the NRA turning against him. Donald Trump is seeing MAGA Republicans in the House and Senate turning against him. Donald Trump is seeing MAGA influencers. He's seeing groups like Barstool turn against him. He's seeing far right-wing writers turn against him. He's seeing other Second Amendment advocates turning against him. You see, Donald Trump has overplayed his hand in trying to engage in his most despicable cover-up yet, and the American people are seeing this for the watershed moment that it is. Frankly, the people in the United States should have been well aware of this before, but this has now reached a fever pitch as Donald Trump and his regime attempted to defame Alex Peretti after he was brutally murdered in cold blood by the Border Patrol Gestapo. By now, I'm sure you know most of the facts, that Alex Peretti was at a peaceful protest in Minneapolis. A female protester was being brutalized by Trump's Border Patrol Gestapo. She was being pepper sprayed. Alex Peretti saw what was happening. He went to help the female protester. That's when the Border Patrol Gestapo started pepper spraying Peretti. They then started beating on him. They gang tackled him. They threw him to the floor. They bludgeoned him over and over again. And then they shot him repeatedly, at least 11 times, and Peretti was killed. Thereafter, the Trump regime tried to frame Peretti and say it was because he had a concealed handgun. Well, then it turned out that he did indeed have a concealed handgun, but he was a legal permit holder of a concealed handgun. He never took the handgun out of its holster. The handgun was where it was supposed to be the entire time. It's exactly why we have a Second Amendment. And in fact, what appears to have taken place is that Trump's Border Patrol Gestapo went into the holster, took out the handgun. Then when there was no handgun in sight, when there was no threat whatsoever, and by the way, there was no threat whatsoever the entire time, the Border Patrol Gestapo murdered Alex Peretti in cold blood. We're learning lots of information about Peretti. What an incredible, courageous person he is. He's the type of hero who did exactly what he did before he was brutally murdered by Trump's Border Patrol Gestapo, where he helped the female protester who was being brutalized by the Gestapo. Peretti was an ICU nurse. He worked at the Minneapolis VA, and from all of the family members of his patients and the patients that he treated at the VA, everybody describes him as one of the most incredible people ever. He's someone who dedicated his life to service. That's why he was working at the VA. He's someone who was very much involved in the sciences and the medicine, trying to always make people's lives better. He was an outdoorsman, a dog dad, and an all-around incredible person. And when the Trump regime immediately came out with statements trying to frame Peretti, calling him a domestic terrorist, saying that because he had a concealed carry permit, that he deserved to be murdered by the Border Patrol Gestapo, Donald Trump, Greg Bovino, Kristi Noem Bovino heads the Border Patrol. Kristi Noem heads the Department of Homeland Security. She's the DHS secretary. They all came out with statements. Why in the world would you concealed carry at a protest? You're not allowed to do that. You're going to die. And then so people were asking, so you're saying that if you peacefully protest, First Amendment right, conceal carry with the legal permit, Second Amendment right, you deserve to be shot and killed, you deserve to be murdered? What the hell are you talking about? And folks, the impact of Donald Trump's disastrous cover-up and this brutal murder is now reverberating across the country and across the world. I'm going to do another video about it this morning, but there's an entire boycott USA, boycott World Cup movement that was already brewing, which is accelerating. People in other countries are saying, why the hell would we want to go to the United States where if we show up, we're going to get killed by Border Patrol and ICE Gestapo. Who wants to go to a World Cup game when you can die, when you can get gassed, when you can get brutalized by the Border Patrol Gestapo? Not to mention that the day began yesterday with Donald Trump threatening 100% tariffs on Canada because Canada was entering into a strategic trade agreement with China, which Donald Trump previously said that he thought was a good idea for Prime Minister Carney to do. And then he calls him Governor Carney. And Trump just goes around offending the entire world, disgracing the United States. And it was less than 48 hours ago, though it feels like a week ago or even more at this point, where we age in dog years under the Trump regime, where he basically said if you were in NATO and you fought with the United States in Afghanistan, you didn't really fight on the front lines, that you're a sucker and a loser, and that other nations didn't sacrifice with the United States. That created massive international backlash. Then that led to earlier yesterday morning, where the murder of Alex Peretti took place. And then right before that, Donald Trump made these statements attacking Prime Minister Carney and Canada. Let's take a look at what's happening as well. You have the Republican chairman, Representative Garabirino, who's formally requested testimony from ICE, CBP, USCIS at a full committee hearing. Congress has an important responsibility to ensure the safety of law enforcement and the people they serve to protect. And here's a letter to Todd Lyons, the acting director of ICE right now. On January 15, 2016, the Committee on Homeland Security staff invited you to testify at the hearing. And he said, you now have to show up formally. This is the Republican who chairs the Homeland Security Committee, saying that these people need to show up, that all of these ICE heads and Border Patrol heads need to show up. We're now also seeing that some of the Democrats who we were being very critical of here on the MeidasTouch network because they were considering funding ICE and Border Patrol in the current funding package, the government will shut down unless these funding packages are passed by the House and the Senate. By now, I'm sure you know, the House passed its portion of the appropriations bill, and now it went to the United States Senate. And the senators who may potentially have supported it are now saying they're not going to support it because they will not support any funding bill that gives additional money to the Department of Homeland Security, ICE, and Border Patrol. Leader Schumer for the Democrats put out the following statement. What's happening in Minnesota is appalling and unacceptable in any American city. Democrats sought common sense reforms in the Department of Homeland Security spending bill, but because of Republicans' refusal to stand up to Trump, the DHS bill is woefully inadequate to rein in the abuses of ICE. I will vote no. Senate Democrats will not provide the votes to proceed to the appropriations bill if the DHS funding bill is included, to which Democratic Congresswoman AOC responded to Schumer's statement by saying, "This is the strength of response we need. People's calls and organizing worked. Thank you to all who mobilized. No action is ever too small. That is why we never give up. Thank you, Senate Dems." And while I'm sure you, like me, are very disappointed, I'm putting it lightly, I should say horrified, at some of those House Democrats who voted to allow additional funding to ICE and to Border Patrol. It was only a small group of those House Dems, which at this point I believe, frankly, is disqualifying, and I want to hear from all of them what they have to say. I am proud that AOC and others have been pushing the Senate to do the right thing. And even though some of these senators were wishy-washy and have betrayed us in the past, and they still may in the future, I am glad that they're putting out a statement saying no funding to ICE. This is an existential issue. If you fund ICE, you should not be reelected at this point. ICE needs to go. Border Patrol needs to go. It's that simple. It's a black and white issue to me, and it should be to the rest of the country at this point. Jake Sherman, who covers the Senate and Congress generally for Punchbowl, says the following. The ICE situation's a nightmare for the Senate. Cannot see a scenario in which Senate Dems can vote for this 6-bill package, which includes Department of Homeland Security funding. The government shuts down Friday. The first Senate procedural vote not likely until Wednesday. So we'll see what happens there. And meanwhile, you had people like Stephen Miller and the White House account and Donald Trump making posts like this. Stephen Miller goes, a would-be assassin tried to murder federal law enforcement and the official Democrat account sides with the terrorists, referring to Alex Pretti as a terrorist and peaceful protesters as terrorists. No, the real terrorist is Stephen Miller, is Donald Trump, is Kristi Noem, is Greg Bovino. This was posted from Trump's account as well as the official White House account. This is the gunman's gun, loaded with 2 additional full magazines and ready to go. What is that all about? Where are the local police? Why aren't they allowed to protect ICE officers? And then the statement goes on to call Alex Peretti a terrorist and an insurrectionist, and the governor's insurrectionist. And then these right-wing influencers like this guy Alex, who's, a total shill, goes, more blood on the hands of Democrats. Dude, shut up. Shut the hell up. But you have people like Tim Pool. You don't get much more MAGA than Tim Pool as a podcaster. He goes, empty hand, the gun in hand. Appears the man may have been disarmed before being shot. This is a chain of events in a greater conflict. Neither side cares at this point what justifies it or doesn't. I don't see Trump winning this one. Or how about this guy who writes for Red State? The claim that he approached the officers with a gun with the intent to massacre them is nonsense, because that's what Kristi Noem and Greg Bovino and Trump and all these MAGAs were out there saying. They put out a statement right away without even knowing Alex Pretti's background, without knowing the heroism he showed his entire life, the selflessness he showed as an ICU nurse, helping veterans and working at the VA, without even knowing the facts that he was there peacefully, that he had a concealed carry permit. The Trump regime immediately slandered in his death Alex Pretti, and they said he was there to massacre everyone. This was part of his plan to massacre. But even this writer from Red State goes, he doesn't draw the weapon, he doesn't reach for it, and instead he gets pepper sprayed while trying to pull another protester off the ground. No one with the intent to commit a massacre is going to do all of that instead of, just standing back, drawing their weapon and firing. Now, this comes from KFC Barstool. This is the Barstool, right-wing, MAGA-ish people. Here's what they had to say. And I think these Barstool people are largely responsible, with a lot of other right-wing podcasters, of perverting the minds of lots of young men and teaching them the wrong things about what's alpha and what's strong. It was always weakness masquerading as strength. It was always the most pathetic stuff. And as a man, that pissed me off to see all these young men being led down this path towards Trumpian ruin, a fraudster, a disrespectful, vile piece of trash. But anyway, here's what KFC Barstool just posted. 37-year-old ICU nurse Alex Peretti murdered by ICE in broad daylight with zero justification for deadly force. I mean zero. This feels like a watershed moment in American history that should enact change, but won't. Very reminiscent of Sandy Hook, when we all said, if that didn't get us to change, we never will. Feels like another one of those, because if you cannot admit this was wrong, you're either an idiot or a liar, and I think you're a bad person and an un-American asshole. The hypocrisy from the same people who have been proudly screaming about the First and Second Amendment for hundreds of years now, trying to say protesting and carrying a legal firearm is reason enough to be murdered. What a joke. And the response from Donald Trump and our leaders to walls is all dangerous and pathetic. We're just a third world country now where masked morons with no training and a gun can kill you for no reason other than, well, we won't get in trouble for it, or out of all the dumb entities to blindly follow for your political affiliations, supporting ICE and Border Patrol is by far the most pathetic. ICE agents and their supporters are the biggest trash in America ever. And by the way, you had people like Donald Trump's United States Attorney, or first assistant United States Attorney for the Central District of California, Bill Asaley. He goes, if you approach law enforcement with a gun, there is a high likelihood they will be legally justified in shooting you. Don't do it. To which the NRA said, this sentiment from the first assistant United States Attorney for the Central District of California is dangerous and wrong. Responsible public voices should be waiting a full investigation, not making generalizations and demonizing law-abiding citizens. And folks, we all saw with our eyes what happened to Alex Pretti. I've showed that video many times before. I don't need to show it any more times. You can go and look at it. He was murdered in cold blood. It's not my opinion. It's not my perspective. It is simply the facts. It is what happens on the videotape. I don't need a further investigation. I've seen the video. It is obvious. To the extent there's a further investigation, I want to know who the hell these ICE and Border Patrol agent murderer thugs are and who else they're doing this to that might not be caught on camera. Now, yesterday in the evening, a lawsuit was also filed by the Hennepin County District Attorney's Office, that's the county where Minneapolis is in, demanding immediate access to federal evidence in the Border Patrol agent's deadly shooting during what took place on Saturday. The Border Patrol, Gestapo, ICE, and DHS are refusing to even let the FBI do the investigation, and they've totally prevented the local state officials, Minneapolis PD, State Attorney General's office, from having any part in the investigation whatsoever. The same thing they did to Renee Nicole Good, who ICE murdered in cold blood. They're doing now in connection with the investigation of Alex Pretti. They're doing the same thing here that they did there. It is utterly despicable. And so the Hennepin County District Attorney's Office, county's office filed a lawsuit demanding that they be given access to the investigation. And they said, under the 10th Amendment, we have a law enforcement responsibility. You can't have the FBI also be cut out, or just you can't have the feds in general cut out local law enforcement from doing the job of local law enforcement. It's not allowed, period, full stop. So you have that lawsuit. We're just learning more about Alex Pretti from his colleagues like Dr. Dimitri Dranoka, who said Alex Pretti was a colleague at the VA. We hired him to recruit for our trial. He became an ICU nurse. I loved working with him. He was a good, kind person who lived to help, and these efforts executed him. Alex, from our time working together while he was in nursing school, later he moved to ICU, working as a nurse to support critically ill veterans. He had such a great attitude. We chat between patients about trying to get in a mountain bike ride together. Well, that will never happen now. We also heard from Mac Randolph. Rest in peace, Alex Pretti. He was my dad's ICU nurse, and he read my dad's final salute at the VA after he passed away. Never wanted to share this video, but his speech is very on point. Also, my father's final words to me was, continue to fight the good fight. He would be honored in Alex's sacrifice and ashamed of this current administration. In my dad's words, I encourage you all to continue the fight. Continue to fight the good fight. I played that video on the video I made last night. If you want to go and watch that, you can go and watch that video again. But I want to read for you now the statement from the family of Alex Pretti that they issued yesterday evening. We are heartbroken, but also very angry. Alex was a kind-hearted soul who cared deeply for his family and friends, and also the American veterans whom he cared for. As an ICU nurse at the Minneapolis VA hospital, Alex wanted to make a difference in this world. Unfortunately, he will not be with us to see his impact. I do not throw around the hero term lightly. However, his last thought and act was to protect a woman. The sickening lies that have been told about our son by the administration are reprehensible and disgusting. Alex is clearly not holding a gun when attacked by Trump's murdering and cowardly ICE thugs. He has his phone in his right hand, and his empty left hand is raised above his head while trying to protect the woman ICE just pushed down, all while being pepper sprayed. Please get the truth out about our son. He was a good man. And I want to reference this as well. Two other things. First, we're learning that Pam Bondi yesterday morning, before the murder took place, sent an extortion letter to Governor Walz and to the Minnesota government officials, the AG, Mayor Fry of Minneapolis. And as Matt McDermott says, as insane as this sounds, it's true. Pam Bondi sent Minnesota officials a letter yesterday saying ICE would leave the state if Minnesota turns over its voter files to the Trump regime. They're openly using state terrorism as a bargaining chip to seize election infrastructure. That's what went down yesterday. And also it should be noted that the Trump regime tried to get the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals to issue an arrest warrant of Don Lemon. And they tried to go around the chief district court judge, who is a George W. Bush appointee. They went around his back while the chief judge was working at home as to help his mentally disabled adult son attend certain classes. The DOJ went around the back of the chief district court judge, ran to the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals to try to get them to issue a warrant to arrest Don Lemon for videotaping a protest at a church in St. Paul. The 8th Circuit Court of Appeals rejected it. And you have this letter from this George W. Bush judge saying, I apologize. He's writing a letter to the 8th Circuit when he finds out that Trump DOJ went around his back. I apologize for addressing this letter to you, but for reasons I will describe, I don't have any other option. I'm working from home today as the program that my mentally disabled son attends each day is closed because of the extreme cold. At 11:34 a.m., I received an email regarding the case entitled NRA United States. This is the first that I have heard of any petition for a writ of mandamus. The United States did not have the courtesy to tell me that they would be filing such a petition, nor did the United States serve the petition on me. I am unable to access any documents because at the request of the United States, the case is sealed, apparently even from me, so I have been given about 2.5 hours to respond to a mandamus petition that I have not read and that I cannot read. You have a George W. Bush judge calling out the criminality of the Trump DOJ as they attempted there to get the Court of Appeals, the circuit court, to arrest Don Lemon as well. I know I covered a lot right there, but that's your comprehensive update of everything taking place. I don't want to show the videos of Kristi Noem anymore where she says that Alex Pretti is a domestic terrorist. I don't want to show you the Greg Bovino video. I'll show you the screenshot of it where they say that he's a domestic terrorist, but I don't want to hear their voice this morning, so I'm not going to play it. That's what's going down. We'll keep you posted every step of the way. Hit subscribe. Let's get to 6 million subscribers. Thanks for watching.
Want to stay plugged in? Become a subscriber to our Substack at MeidasPlus.com. You'll get daily recaps from Ron Filipkowski, ad-free episodes of our podcast, and more exclusive content only available at MeidasPlus.com.